Just like I promised, here I am to talk about your leadership paper and what you should be thinking about to make sure that you are able to turn in the best possible work. All right, so I'm in the syllabus, page 6, as you can see, and you see what the paper is worth, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we start with who should you interview? As I have mentioned previously, you can interview anybody. Maybe it's somebody who's living where you are living right now. Maybe it's somebody that you can FaceTime with or do a Google Hangout with. It doesn't matter as long as, second, it's face to face. So, again, first, make sure you've picked someone that you think of as a leader. They don't need to think about themselves that way, they don't need to have a title. As we know, having a title doesn't make a person a leader, and not having a title doesn't mean a person isn't a leader. So, pick whomever you're most interested in learning more about, who you also think is a leader. Ideally, face to face, but it is a pandemic. And so the person you think of, you might need to do a virtual interview, right? Again, Google Hangout, Skype, FaceTime, whatever, doesn't matter. Do you have to record this? No, it really depends on how fast you can type. If you're a pretty fast typist, cool. Bring up the syllabus, go to where all of the interview questions are, and then type in the answers right after each question. You can do this with bullet points. It is not necessary to get exact phrasing or sentences or anything like that. It's perfectly cool to do bullet points. So again, how fast can you type? How fast can you write? As long as you feel as though you're able to get what you need from typing or writing, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to record it. So how do you write this? It's all laid out in the syllabus in terms of the sections. I'm going to emphasize some things here. Cover page. I actually don't care what your cover page looks like as long as you have the information that shows here included somewhere on that cover page. And don't forget, please spell my name correctly. Getting people's names correct is important. I'll leave it at that. The first part of your paper is the introduction. And what I don't want you to do in the introduction is foreshadow what's in the rest of the paper. Please do not write your introduction as, in the following paper, I talk about blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. I don't want there to be any repetition between your introduction and the rest of your paper. What I want you to do in the introduction is tell the reader, tell me, but also the person you're interviewing, because ultimately I want you to give this paper to them. Tell them why you chose them. Of all the people you could have chosen to interview, why did you choose this person? What was it about this person that made you think, oh, first of all, I see this person as a leader, and secondly, I'd like to learn more from this person? Include the information that you see listed here in the syllabus. Again, don't foreshadow what's going on in the rest of the paper. Just basically tell why this person. Make this a page and a half. Not one page, not 2 pages, a page and a half. I've been doing this assignment for a long time, and in my experience, a page and a half is perfect. So hit that mark. Now, you get to the main part, the main story, as I call it. This should be about 5 to 7 pages long. And here what you're going to be doing is not going through each of the interview questions and the answers. Some of those questions and answers you might not use at all, and that's fine. What you don't want is to just start from the top and go, and then I asked this question and the person said this, and then I asked this question and the person said that, and then I said blah, blah, blah. Yawn. First of all of the questions and all of the answers will appear in your appendix. So your paper should not replicate that. Instead, notice what's in all caps here. What you're doing in the main story is telling the person's leadership story in the most interesting and compelling way possible. For everything you decide to focus on, I want you to follow the format that you see in A through D. Talk about what the person said, including examples. You can use direct quotes, but you don't have to. Then, what are your perceptions of what the person has said? They say they do one thing. Have you seen that person doing that sort of thing? Third, do you agree or disagree with that person's opinions? Are you on the same page with that person? And then I want you to explicitly link what the person says to what we're studying in class. Okay? So one of the questions gets at whether the person is more task or relations oriented. You'll remember this from chapter 12 on leadership. And you ask the question, which do they think one is more important than the other, et cetera. And the person says, well, in all of my years of leading people, it's been my experience that relationships are what really matter. That's what really I care about the most. And I really try to focus on building supportive, trusting relationships with people. Okay, so you relay that. You say essentially that. And the next thing is your opinion. Interestingly, if I had been answering this question about this person without having heard their answer, I would have said, I think this person cares more about task. At least what I've observed over the years is that the person tends to push people away when they're working on a project. That seems to be what matters most to them. Third, your opinions. Even though I'm not sure the person really believes that relationships matter the most, I can say that for me, they really do. It's what I care about. And then fourth, relationships versus task. Well, we know from what we talked about in class that in reality, really effective leaders have to care about both. In any given moment, of course, the task might be more important or the relationship, but ultimately, leaders have to find an appropriate balance. Okay, you see what I did there? I took an idea, a response that the person had shared through the interview. I communicated that response. Then I communicated my observations. Had I seen the person behaving consistent with what the person said? Then I shared my thoughts about the question, as if I were being interviewed. And then finally, tying this to the class material. I want to see all four of those things happening for each major topic that you cover in this main story. That's how I want it to read. Again, not simple, here was the question, here was the person's answer. Here was the question, here was the person's answer. But rather, we discussed X. The person said Y. In my experience with this person, I have or I haven't seen the person behaving this way or behaving consistent with what the person has said. I agree or don't agree with what the person has said. In my experience, for me, if I were being interviewed, this is how I would have responded to the question. And then finally, this is how we talked about this in class, or this is how the text talks about it. Could be something like the person has agreed with what the text says, or the person's take on things is quite different from the text. I wonder why that is. Again, this is what I want to see over and over in your main story. Then you're going to get to your concluding thoughts. Again, precisely a page and a half. This is where you're going to talk about 2 to 3 key takeaways. In other words, what did you learn from this person, both in the interview, but also perhaps in other situations and circumstances? What 2 to 3 lessons have you learned that you will use to make yourself an effective leader going forward? What I want you to do here is not just say what the lesson is, but then to dive into exactly how you're going to translate those lessons into action. What specifically are you going to do? What's your step-by-step plan for acting on this knowledge that you've acquired? Make sure again that you also explicitly link what you're talking about, what you're writing about, to things we've covered in class. Every single question that I've included in the syllabus, those interview questions, relates to something from class. So this should not be too difficult of an exercise. Then the appendix. Again, the appendix, all of the questions followed by all of the answers. And make sure you've got both, all of the questions followed by all of the answers. If you look at the next page in the syllabus, here are all the questions. So you need to have asked your person every one of these, starting with number 1, then number 2, then number 3. This should look familiar to you because these are the questions that you answered when we were talking about principle-centered leadership. So you're going to ask all these. You're going to ask the next set. You're going to keep going with this next set. And then this set. Now, it's very realistic to imagine that this interview might take you an hour. It could even take a little bit longer, depending on how much the person wants to talk. You have 24 questions. 24 questions, even if the person only took 2 minutes, that's still taking you up to right around the hour. So don't be surprised if it takes that long. And you can tell your person that as you plan this interview. Notice on the next page some of the particular requirements. The final paper must be readable in Word. Save it as either a DOC or a DOCX. Double-spaced, 12-point. Use Garamond for your font, not Times New Roman, not Arial, Garamond. Number your pages and use 1-inch margins all around. Altogether, not counting your cover page, a table of contents if you include that in your appendix, the paper should be about 8 to 10 pages. Remember, 1.5 for the intro, 1.5 for the conclusion, and then 5 to 7 for that main story in the middle. And you're going to submit this all to Moodle. Notice how I've asked you to label the document. That makes all of these things that I'm asking you to do in terms of formatting, make it a whole lot easier for me to find your work, to make sure that it's consistent in terms of number of pages for the different parts, et cetera, so that I can, as fairly as possible, grade your work and hopefully, fingers crossed, give you an awesome grade. Speaking of grading, first, notice that you need to use the editing checklist that's included on the Moodle site. That's where you'll read things about what you want to make sure you don't do, all right? Something that you can double check your writing against. And then you can see the criteria. They're all listed here. And on Moodle, I have the rubric that I'm going to use so you can see exactly how many points each piece is worth. So there should be no uncertainty, hopefully, in terms of what you need to do and how you need to do it. I'm not concerned about if you want to source some material. For example, if you do use a direct quote from the text or the lecture outline, well, obviously you want to put that in quotation marks and then include something as simple as text, page whatever, or lecture outline, chapter 12, whatever, something really simple, just be consistent. I'm not concerned with you using APA or MLA or Chicago or any of that. It doesn't matter. You can keep any sort of sourcing very simple. Just follow the formatting guidelines that I have for you in the syllabus. Okay? Now, I'll tell you something. Usually, doing the interview is something that people really enjoy. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're talking to someone that you view in a positive manner. And always, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a student tell me differently. People learn things, even when they're interviewing somebody that they know really well, like a mom or dad or grandparent, they still learn a lot. So this gets back to the whole idea of giving you an assignment that is hopefully interesting for you and also a bit challenging because you need to be able to link what that person is saying to what we're studying in class. And again, it could be that they're agreeing with what we're studying in class or not, or maybe somewhat. It doesn't, I mean, people don't have to agree with what's in the text, right? What the different theories say. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Again, it's an opportunity for you to learn something from someone you admire. I want you to imagine submitting this paper not just to me, but also to that person as a way of thanking them for the time that they'll have gifted to you. So do your best. And if you have any specific questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Don't hesitate. Reach out to me. I will be happy to answer any question you have about this assignment. You've got, I think, about 2 weeks to get it done. So good luck. Thanks. And again, let me know if you have any questions.